I never thought I'd be the type of woman to sell a house from under my husband's feet. But then again, I never thought I'd become a stranger in my own home either. Funny how life works out sometimes. My name is Gwendolyn, and this is the story of how I lost everything to gain myself back. It started 3 months ago when Rocky's family showed up on our doorstep with their belongings stuffed into garbage bags. I was in the middle of a work call when the doorbell rang. There they stood, Alyssa clutching her designer purse, Ernest avoiding eye contact, and Griffin smirking like this was all some cosmic joke. "We've been evicted," Alyssa announced, chin held high as if she were announcing a promotion. "Rocky said we could stay here until we sort things out." I muted my call. "He what?" "Oh." Alyssa's perfectly plucked eyebrows arched. "He didn't tell you?" That night, Rocky and I had our first real fight in 2 years of marriage. "They're my family," he pleaded, those warm brown eyes that once made me weak, now making me wary. "It'll just be for a little while, a month, tops." I should have known better. I really should have. The first week wasn't terrible. I worked from home 3 days a week, so I watched as they settled in. Alyssa commandeered the guest room. Ernest and Griffin took over the basement. And slowly, surely, their possessions began to spread like an infection throughout my carefully curated home. "Honey," Alyssa called out one afternoon while I was preparing lunch, "your kitchen organization is so interesting. Mind if I rearrange things? Make it more functional?" Before I could respond, she was already emptying my cabinets. I watched as she relegated my grandmother's china to the highest shelf, replacing it with her own mismatched plates. "There," she said, dusting her hands. "Much better. You'll thank me later." Griffin treated the house like his personal hotel. Empty beer cans littered the coffee table, pizza boxes stacked in corners. When I asked him to clean up, he'd laugh. "Relax, sis. You're too uptight." I wasn't his sister. I wasn't anything to them except an inconvenience with a mortgage. 2 weeks in, I came home to find Alyssa had redecorated the living room. My modern minimalist aesthetic was buried under floral throws and tacky figurines. "Just brightening things up," she said, not looking up from her phone. "This place was so cold before." Rocky, when he was home, seemed to shrink into himself. He'd kiss me quickly, avoid my eyes, and find reasons to stay late at work. The few times I tried to discuss the situation, he'd deflect. "They're trying their best," he'd say. "Mom's looking for work. Dad's got some leads." But I never saw them looking at job listings. Instead, Alyssa spent her days watching reality TV at full volume while I tried to work. Ernest wandered the house like a ghost, and Griffin treated my car like his personal Uber service. The breaking point came exactly 1 month in. I was hosting a virtual meeting with my team when Alyssa barged into my office, my sacred space, without knocking. "We need to talk about the grocery situation," she announced, loud enough to be heard by everyone on my call. I muted myself. "I'm in a meeting." "This is important. We're out of organic almond milk, and Griffin needs his protein powder. Also, the cleaning service you use is subpar. I found a better one. Bit more expensive, but—" "I'm in a meeting," I repeated, feeling something crack inside me. She waved dismissively. "We should just change the deed. You barely live here anyway, dear." The words hung in the air like poison. I forced a smile, but something shifted inside me. Something cold and calculating woke up. That night, I lay beside Rocky, listening to his steady breathing. Downstairs, I could hear Griffin's video games, Alyssa's shrill laugh at some late-night show. This house, my sanctuary, had become a prison. "Rocky," I whispered, knowing he was awake. "Are they really looking for their own place?" He rolled over, away from me. "They just need time." Time, that's what everyone needed, apparently. Everyone except me. I got up quietly and went to my office. Opening my laptop, I typed a quick email to my friend Selena, a real estate agent. "Need to discuss something important. Can we meet tomorrow?" Her response came quickly. "Of course. Everything okay?" I looked around my office, the only space still truly mine, and thought about Alyssa's comment about the deed, about Rocky's silence, about the slow, steady erosion of my peace. "No," I typed back, "but it will be." The next morning I found Alyssa in my bathroom, hogging the mirror as she applied her makeup. My makeup, actually, the expensive kind I saved for special occasions. "Oh good, you're up," she said, not moving an inch. "The hot water's been running a bit cold. You should call someone about that." I stood in the doorway, toothbrush in hand. "I need to get ready for work." "Just 5 more minutes, dear." She started curling her hair. "You know, at my age, it takes a bit more effort to look presentable. Not that you'd understand yet." 40 minutes later, I finally got into my own bathroom. The counter was littered with open containers, and my favorite lipstick was nowhere to be found. At work, I met Selena for coffee. She took one look at my face and said, "Spill." "They're taking over," I said, stirring my untouched latte. "It's like I'm living in their house now, not the other way around." "Have they contributed anything? Rent? Utilities?" I laughed bitterly. "Alyssa said they're between situations right now, whatever that means." "And Rocky?" "Keeps saying it's temporary, but yesterday—" I hesitated. "Yesterday Griffin took my car without asking. When I brought it up, Rocky said I was being selfish. Selfish? In my own home." Selena leaned forward. "Girl, you need to set boundaries. Or better yet, get them out." "How? They're family." "No." Selena's eyes narrowed. "They're parasites, and I can help you with that if you're ready." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Rocky. "Mom's making dinner tonight. Don't worry about cooking." I returned home to find my kitchen in chaos. Pots and pans everywhere, flour dusting every surface, and the distinct smell of something burning. "Oh, there you are," Alyssa called out. "We needed a few things, so I used your credit card. Hope you don't mind. Rocky said it was fine." My credit card. The one I kept in my dresser drawer. "You went through my things?" "Don't be dramatic," she waved dismissively. "We're family. Now be a dear and set the table. Use the nice plates, the ones I reorganized." During dinner, Griffin burped loudly and dropped his fork. "Sis, get me another one?" "I'm not your sister," I said quietly. The table fell silent. Rocky cleared his throat. "Gwen." "No." I stood up. "I'm not your sister. I'm not your maid. And I'm not your ATM." "See?" Alyssa turned to Rocky. "This is what I was telling you about. So ungrateful. After we've tried so hard to make this house a real home." I left the table and locked myself in my office, hands shaking as I texted Selena. "What did you mean by help?" Later that night, I overheard Alyssa and Rocky in the kitchen. I stood in the shadows, listening. "She thinks this is her house." Alyssa's voice dripped with disdain. "Ha! She pays the mortgage, but we own him." Rocky's response was too quiet to hear, but his silence said everything. I backed away before they could notice me, bumping into Ernest in the hallway. For a moment, our eyes met. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then looked away and shuffled past. The next morning, I found a note on my car. "Borrowed it again. Be back later. Griffin." I called an Uber to work, using the ride to compose myself. My colleague Taya noticed something was off. "You okay?" she asked during lunch. "You seem different lately." "Just family stuff," I said vaguely. "Family can be tough," she nodded. "My cousin stayed with me once, took months to get rid of her, had to get creative." Creative. The word stuck with me. That evening, I came home to find Alyssa had invited her book club over. 8 women I'd never met were scattered across my living room, drinking my wine, eating my food. "Oh, Gwendolyn," Alyssa called out. "Come meet everyone. We were just discussing making this a weekly thing. Your house is perfect for hosting." I smiled. Not the forced smile I'd been wearing for months. A different smile. A dangerous one. "Actually," I said, "I need to make a call. Business stuff. You understand?" In my office, I pulled up Selena's number. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "Is the offer from that investor still on the table?" I whispered. "The cash buyer?" "Yeah, they're still interested." "Why?" I looked at the family photo on my desk. Rocky and me on our wedding day, before everything changed, before I became a stranger in my own home. "Because," I said, "it's time to get creative." Sunday morning. Family breakfast. The tension in the air was thick enough to spread on toast. I'd spent the week watching my bank account drain faster than usual. Shopping trips I never approved, restaurant deliveries I never ordered, and a mysterious charge for a golf membership, courtesy of Griffin, no doubt. "I think," I said, cutting through the sound of clinking silverware, "we need to talk about finances." Alyssa paused mid-bite. "Oh? It's been 2 months. The utilities have tripled. The grocery bill is astronomical, and none of you have contributed anything." Rocky shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Griffin snorted into his orange juice. "Well," Alyssa set down her fork with practiced precision, "we're family. Family helps family. When Rocky was growing up—" "I'm not talking about Rocky's childhood," I interrupted. "I'm talking about now, about jobs, about responsibility." Ernest suddenly became very interested in his coffee cup. Rocky started to say something, but Alyssa cut him off with a laugh that could freeze hell. "You're just the ATM here, dear. Your opinion doesn't really matter." The words hit like a slap. Rocky stared at his plate. Griffin smirked. Ernest's coffee cup shook slightly. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Alyssa waved her hand. "We all know our roles here. You make the money, we make this house a home. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about remodeling the kitchen. Those countertops are so dated." My voice came out eerily calm. "You want to remodel my kitchen?" "Our kitchen," she corrected. "Rocky, tell her about the contractor I found." Rocky cleared his throat. "Mom has some great ideas, honey, and since you're always at work anyway—" I walked out of the room before I could say something I'd regret. Or maybe something I wouldn't regret enough. In my office, I called Selena. "They want to remodel my kitchen," I whispered, afraid they might hear. "They called me an ATM." "Jesus," Selena breathed. "And Rocky?" "Sided with them. Again." "The investor I mentioned? They can close in 2 weeks. Cash deal, no questions asked." I closed my eyes, remembering the day I bought this house. Before Rocky, before any of this. I'd been so proud, so independent. "Send me the paperwork." That afternoon, I drove to my bank and opened a new account. As I transferred most of my savings, the teller gave me a concerned look. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "Just being careful," I smiled. "Family, you know?" When I got home, Alyssa was showing a contractor around my kitchen. My kitchen. The one I'd saved for years to renovate myself. "Oh, good, you're back," she beamed. "We're thinking marble countertops. Nothing but the best for our family, right?" I nodded, watching as she gestured grandly around my space, making plans for my money. Rocky appeared behind her looking pleased. "Mom's really got an eye for design," he said proudly. "She sure does," I replied. "Always knows exactly what she wants." That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. Griffin's video games downstairs, Ernest's snoring from the basement, Alyssa's late-night phone conversations about her renovation plans. My phone buzzed. A text from Taya. "Weird question. Isn't your brother-in-law Griffin? Saw him on a dating app saying he's temporarily crashing with friends while saving for his own place. Thought you should know." I got up and went to my office, pulling out the paperwork Selena had emailed. The investor's offer was more than fair. All cash, quick close, no contingencies. My phone buzzed again. Alyssa had added me to a group chat. Kitchen renovation dreams. I muted the chat and started filling out the forms. My hands were steady now, my mind clear. As I signed my name on page after page, I thought about Alyssa's words at breakfast. Just the ATM. Well, this ATM was about to go permanently out of service. I worked through the night, scanning and sending documents to Selena. At dawn, I heard Alyssa in the kitchen, probably planning more changes to my home. "Morning, dear," she called out as I passed. "I've been thinking about the living room next. That modern art of yours is so cold." I smiled. "You're right, Alyssa. Changes are definitely coming." She beamed, missing the edge in my voice. "I knew you'd see things our way eventually." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Rocky was coming down the stairs. "Where are you going so early?" he asked. "Just running some errands," I said. "Don't worry about it." As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Alyssa in the window, already measuring for new curtains. 2 weeks, I thought. Just 2 more weeks. Then we'd all learn exactly whose house this was. The for sale sign lay flat in my trunk, covered by a blanket. Selena helped me plant it in the backyard at midnight, angled so it couldn't be seen from the house. "The buyers want to see it tomorrow," she whispered. "Can you get everyone out?" "Leave that to me." At breakfast, I announced, "I'm treating everyone to the new water park tomorrow. My company gave me passes." "Oh, how generous," Alyssa said, eyeing me suspiciously. "But I have my hair appointment." "And I've got plans," Griffin added, not looking up from his phone. "Perfect." While they were out, the buyers walked through my house. They loved it. No contingencies, no inspection needed. Just like Selena promised. "We can close in 10 days, the husband said. I signed the papers in my car, parked 2 blocks away. My hands didn't shake at all. That evening, I started phase 2. I rented a storage unit and began moving things out piece by piece. Small things at first. Photo albums, important documents, my grandmother's jewelry. "Spring cleaning?" Rocky asked, noticing some empty spaces. "Just decluttering," I smiled. "Your mother's right. We need to make some changes." He beamed, kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad you're finally coming around." At work, Taya stopped by my desk. "Hey, about that dating app thing." "What about it?" "Griffin's profile. It says he's been staying with friends for 6 months. But hasn't he been living with you?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Tell me more." She pulled up the profile on her phone. There he was, my brother-in-law, claiming he was between places and staying with buddies while his investment property finalizes. Investment property. With my money, no doubt. That night, I made a show of packing a weekend bag. "Girls' spa weekend," I announced. "I need some me time." "But what about the kitchen samples?" Alyssa protested. "The contractor's coming Monday." "You handle it," I said sweetly. "You have such good taste." I checked into a hotel 10 minutes away and waited. Selena's text came at midnight. "Deal closed, money wired." I ordered champagne from room service and watched the city lights blur through my tears. Not sad tears, relief tears, freedom tears. The next week was a dance of deception. I hired movers to come during the day, telling Alyssa they were delivering new furniture. Instead, they quietly packed my remaining belongings into unmarked trucks. "Where's that painting going?" Rocky asked one afternoon, catching a glimpse of wrapped canvas. "Being reframed," I lied smoothly. "Surprise for your mother." He hugged me. "You're amazing. You know that?" I let him hold me, remembering when his embrace felt like home. Now it felt like handcuffs. Griffin caught me boxing up kitchen items. "What's with all the packing?" he asked, suspicious. "Just organizing," I said. "By the way, how's that investment property coming along?" He paled slightly but recovered quickly. "What investment property?" "Oh, my mistake. Must be thinking of someone else's dating profile." He left the room quickly after that. The final piece fell into place when Alyssa announced a family dinner at her favorite restaurant. "To celebrate our new kitchen plans," she declared. "Gwendolyn's treating, of course." I watched them pile into their cars, heading to the restaurant where they'd find no reservation and a maxed-out credit card. By then, I'd be gone. The new owners arrived with their moving truck as my family's taillights disappeared around the corner. Right on schedule. "Keys?" the husband asked. I handed them over, along with a detailed list of my in-laws' belongings. "Everything not on this list is yours to keep or dispose of." "And the people living here?" "They'll be gone tonight," I assured him. "One way or another." I helped the movers pack up what remained of the Dean family's possessions, placing everything in garbage bags on the curb, just like how they'd arrived 3 months ago. My phone buzzed. "Rocky. There's no reservation. Mom's furious. What's going on?" I didn't reply. Instead, I sent one final text to Selena. "It's done." Standing in the driveway, I watched the new owners change the locks. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked to my waiting Uber. Behind me, I heard cars approaching, my family returning from their failed dinner. I didn't turn around. Let them find the new owners. Let them find their belongings on the curb. Let them finally understand what it feels like to be unwelcome in a place you thought was home. The Uber driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Rough night?" I smiled, watching my old life disappear in the side mirror. "No. Perfect night." My phone kept buzzing. I turned it off. The ATM was closed for business. The day before everything ended, I decided to host one final dinner. A last supper, if you will. I wanted to remember every detail, every smug smile, every casual insult. I wanted to burn it all into my memory to remind myself why I had to do this. I cooked all day. Pot roast, Alyssa's favorite. She hovered in the kitchen, criticizing my technique. "The meat's too tough," she said, poking at it. "I would have done it differently." "I'm sure you would have," I smiled, thinking of the signed papers hidden in my purse. Griffin sprawled on the couch, feet up on my coffee table. "Hey, sis, beer me." I brought him one, watching him add another ring stain to the wood. It didn't matter anymore. None of it did. "We should talk about the backyard," Alyssa announced during dinner. "Those flower beds are an eyesore. I'm thinking we could tear them out, put in a koi pond." "Sounds expensive," I said, sipping my wine. "Well, you work so hard." She smiled that serpentine smile. "You deserve nice things. We all do." Rocky beamed. "Mom's got great vision, and since you're never home anyway." I watched him choose his mother over me for the 1,000th time. The last time. "Speaking of home improvements," Ernest spoke up, rare for him, "we should host a family cookout next weekend. Show everyone what we've done with the place." "Wonderful idea," Alyssa clapped. "We can invite my whole book club. Gwendolyn, dear, you'll handle the catering?" I nodded, wondering what they'd be doing next weekend when reality crashed down around them. After dinner, I went upstairs to pack away the last personal items. Our wedding photo caught my eye. Rocky and me, young and stupidly in love. I wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and placed it in a box marked "Donations." "What are you doing?" I turned to find Rocky in the doorway. "Just organizing," I said, the lie smooth as silk on my tongue. "Your mother's right. Time for changes." He hugged me from behind. "I knew you'd come around. Mom says you've been so much more agreeable lately." I let him hold me, remembering when his touch felt like safety instead of chains. Downstairs, Griffin was on his phone laughing. "This place is practically ours now," he called out to no one in particular. I raised my glass. "Let's make this a weekend to remember." Later that night, I found Ernest alone in the kitchen. "You're different," he said quietly. "Calmer." "Am I?" He studied me. "Whatever you're planning, just remember, actions have consequences." "I know," I said. "I've been living with the consequences of other people's actions for months." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. In bed, Rocky snored beside me while I made my final preparations. Text to Selena. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Her reply came quickly. "Movers confirmed for 2 p.m. New owners arriving at 3. You sure about this?" I looked at Rocky, remembering our first date. Our wedding. The life I thought we'd have. Then I remembered his silence, his cowardice, his choices. Yes, I typed back. I'm sure. Morning came too quickly. I made breakfast one last time, watching them eat, listening to their plans for my house. Their house, as they saw it. The contractor's coming Monday, Alyssa reminded me. We'll need your credit card again. Of course, I smiled. Anything for family. I left for work early, my real destination the hotel where I'd watch it all unfold. As I backed out of the driveway, Rocky waved from the porch. Love you, he called out. I waved back, wondering if he'd ever loved me more than he feared his mother. At noon, my phone exploded with notifications. They'd returned early from their errands to find strangers in their house. My house, not their house anymore. Alyssa, what have you done? Griffin, WTF is happening? Rocky, baby, please answer your phone. Ernest, I understand. I turned off my phone and ordered room service. By now, they'd be standing on the curb with their belongings in garbage bags, just like they'd arrived. By now, they'd be realizing that the ATM had not just closed, it had disappeared entirely. I took out the manila envelope containing the divorce papers and hotel voucher for Rocky. One night only, just enough time to realize what he'd lost. Actions have consequences, I whispered to my reflection in the hotel window. Outside, storm clouds gathered. Perfect weather for a family emergency. I watched it unfold through the security cameras I'd installed last week. Money well spent. 2:15 p.m. The movers arrived, efficient and professional. They started replacing furniture with the new owner's belongings just as planned. 2:45 p.m. Rocky's car pulled into the driveway. Early. Of course they came home early. Alyssa probably wanted to supervise the contractor she'd scheduled without my knowledge. The camera caught their expressions perfectly as they stepped out of their cars. Confusion, disbelief, rage. What is the meaning of this? Alyssa's voice came through crystal clear on the audio feed. Who are you people? The head mover handed her my prepared letter. I watched her manicured hands shake as she opened it. No, she whispered. Then louder. No! Rocky grabbed the paper. This has to be a mistake. This is our house. The new owner, right on time, stepped out of his car. Actually, it's my house now. I have the deed right here. Griffin tried to push past him. Like hell it is. Where's Gwendolyn? Mrs. Foster left these for you, the mover said, pointing to the neat piles of garbage bags on the curb. And this envelope for Mr. Dean. I zoomed in on Rocky's face as he opened the manila envelope. Divorce papers, hotel voucher, a single note. You chose your side, now live with it. She can't do this, Alyssa shrieked. Rocky, call the police. The new owner held up his paperwork. I have everything in order. This is a legal sale. You're trespassing now. Ernest stood silently by the curb, staring at their belongings in garbage bags. The same way they'd arrived 3 months ago. Poetry in motion. My things, Alyssa wailed. My antiques, my family heirlooms. All itemized in there, I whispered to my hotel room TV screen, watching the feed. Every tacky figurine accounted for. Griffin kicked one of the bags. This is bullshit. She's just the ATM, remember? She can't do this to us. Former ATM, I texted to his phone. Service permanently discontinued. Rocky tried calling me again. And again. And again. I let each one go to voicemail, imagining the desperation in his voice growing with each attempt. The new owner was losing patience. You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings before I call the authorities. But my kitchen renovation. Alyssa grabbed Rocky's arm. The contractor is coming Monday. Tell him, Rocky. Tell him this is our house. Mom, Rocky's voice cracked. Mom, please, just, let's get our stuff. Rain started to fall as they scrambled to gather their bags. Alyssa kept screaming about lawyers, about rights, about ingratitude. Griffin punched the mailbox, then howled in pain. Ernest just quietly loaded bags into their cars. My phone buzzed with a text from Selena. Watching from across the street. This is better than Netflix. This isn't over, Alyssa screamed at the house. Do you hear me, Gwendolyn? This isn't over. But it was. The new owner closed the door and changed the locks. I watched through the cameras as they drove away. Cars loaded with garbage bags, their temporary kingdom crumbling behind them. I switched off the feed and finally checked my voicemails. Rocky. Baby, please, we can talk about this. Alyssa. You ungrateful little. Griffin. You're going to regret this, sis. Ernest. I understand. Goodbye. A knock at my hotel room door made me jump. It was Selena, holding a bottle of champagne. That, she said, stepping inside, was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Did Alyssa really try to hit the new owner with her purse? Girl, yes. And when Griffin realized his gaming console was in one of those bags, priceless. We poured the champagne and watched the storm through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My phone kept buzzing with threats, pleas, and promises. Rocky's at the hotel, I said, checking the front desk camera feed on my laptop. The one where I left him the voucher. Are you going to talk to him? I thought about all the times he could have talked to me, all the times he chose silence over support. No, I said, turning off my phone. I've said everything I need to say. Selena raised her glass. To karma. To consequences, I replied. Below, through the rain-streaked windows, I could see the city lights blurring. Somewhere out there, a family was learning that actions have consequences, that ATMs can fight back, that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And somewhere, in a brand new house, a happy family was moving in, making it their home, their real home. The high of revenge wore off around midnight. Selena had left, and I stood alone in my hotel suite, staring at the city lights through rain-streaked windows. My phone buzzed again. Taya. You need to know something, her text read. About Rocky. Can I come up? 5 minutes later, she was at my door, looking nervous. I didn't want to say anything before, she started, pacing the room. But now that you've done this, you should know you did the right thing. What do you mean? She pulled out her phone, showing me a series of photos. Rocky at a bar, Rocky with his arm around a blonde, Rocky kissing her. My cousin works at that bar, Taya said softly. He's been seeing her for months, always when you were working late. The champagne turned sour in my stomach. How long? Since before his family moved in. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, memories flooding back. The late nights at work, the way he avoided my eyes, the constant defense of his family. He wasn't just weak, I whispered. He was a coward in every way possible. Taya sat beside me. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. No, I shook my head. I needed to do what I did for the right reasons, not out of anger or jealousy, for me. After she left, I found myself opening my laptop, clicking through old photos. Rocky and me at the beach, Rocky helping me paint the house, Rocky down on one knee, promising forever. Liar, I whispered to his smiling face. A new email popped up, from Ernest. I'm at the shelter on 5th Street. Alyssa and Griffin went to her sister's, but they wouldn't take me. Rocky's... Well, I don't know where Rocky is. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not for what you did, but for what we did to make you do it. I closed the laptop without replying. Sleep wouldn't come. I ordered room service at 3 a.m., pancakes I couldn't eat. The waiter gave me a sympathetic look. Bad breakup? Bad everything, I replied. Dawn found me in the hotel gym, running nowhere on a treadmill, trying to outpace my thoughts. My phone kept lighting up with messages. Alyssa, you've ruined everything. I hope you're happy. Griffin, where's my gaming stuff? I had saves on that console. Rocky, please, I love you. We can fix this. I deleted them all without reading further. My boss Nicole called around noon. Take the week off, she said. You've got the vacation days. I need to work, I protested. No, you need to process. Trust me. I've been there. You have? She laughed. 3 years ago, caught my husband with his secretary. Classic, right? Sold his beloved boat while he was at work. Best therapy ever. I found myself smiling. Did it help? The boat money paid for actual therapy, which helped more. Speaking of which, she texted me a number. Dr. Sarah Martinez, family therapist. I stared at the number for a long time before saving it. Selena brought lunch. Real food, not hotel fare. She found me surrounded by scattered photos and old cards. What are you doing? Trying to figure out when it all went wrong, I said, when he stopped being my husband and started being their son again. She gathered up the photos. Stop. This isn't helping. But, no buts, get dressed. We're going out. She took me to a luxury apartment complex across town. Modern, secure, with a doorman and a view of the park. They have short-term leases, she said. 3 months minimum, long enough to figure out your next move. The apartment was small but pristine. No floral throws, no beer stains, no echoes of false family. It's expensive, I hesitated. You just sold a house. You can afford it. I signed the lease that afternoon. As we carried in my suitcases, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the blonde from the photos. He's been lying to me too. Said he was separated. Just found out about you. I'm sorry. I blocked the number without replying. That night in my new apartment, I opened my laptop to delete more photos. Instead, I found myself typing, Dear Rocky, I thought about writing a long letter, explaining everything. About how you betrayed me twice. Once with her, once with them. About how you watched me disappear in my own home and did nothing. About how you chose everyone else over me, every single time. But you don't deserve my words anymore. Goodbye. I deleted his number instead of sending it. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, for the first time in months, there was only silence. My silence. My space. My choice. I slept dreamlessly that night, alone in my new beginning. The postcard arrived on a sunny Tuesday. No return address, just Ernest's shaky handwriting. Thank you for doing what Rocky never could. You set us all free in a way, even if some of us don't see it yet. E. I pinned it to my new bulletin board right next to my therapy appointment card and the lease for my recording studio. Ready? Selena asked, adjusting the microphone. We're live in 5. I settled into my chair, facing the professional recording equipment. The red light blinked on. Welcome to Boundaries and Backbone, where we talk about taking back your life, one story at a time. I'm your host, Gwendolyn. The podcast had started as therapy homework. Share your story, Dr. Martinez had suggested. Now it was gaining traction with women calling in to share their own experiences of finding their voice. Today's topic, when family isn't family anymore. The calls started flowing. My mother-in-law moved in temporarily 2 years ago. My husband always takes his sister's side. They're draining my accounts but call me selfish when I object. I answered each one, sharing pieces of my own story. Not for revenge anymore, but for healing. For helping. During the break, Taya texted, Rocky's mom is living with his sister now. Apparently, she's redecorating their house too. I smiled, imagining Alyssa's sister dealing with her improvements. The studio door opened. Nicole stepped in, holding coffee. Your numbers are amazing, she said. The network wants to syndicate. Really? Really? You're helping people, Gwen. Who knew selling a house could start a movement? After the show, I checked my mail. Divorce papers signed by Rocky. No contest, no claims, no drama. Just his signature and a single line. I'm sorry I was a coward. Too little, too late. My phone rang. Griffin's number. I almost declined, but curiosity won. What? I got a job. he said quietly. A real one. And my own place. Good for you. Look, I was awful to you. Entitled and lazy, and you were right to do what you did. I let the silence stretch. That's all I wanted to say. He finished. And thanks for the wake-up call. I hung up without responding. Some bridges stay burned. Back at my apartment, I found a package. Inside was my grandmother's china, the set Alyssa had relegated to the highest shelf. A note from the new homeowners. Found this hidden away. Seemed important. I traced the delicate patterns, remembering quiet Sunday dinners before the invasion, before the loss, before the victory. My doorman called up. Ms. Foster, there's an Ernest here to see you. I considered saying no, but something in me had softened. Not enough to forgive, but enough to listen. He stood awkwardly in my living room, looking older, smaller. I'm in therapy, he said without preamble. Learning to speak up, stand up. Better late than never. Alyssa and we're separated. She can't understand why. Keeps saying you destroyed our family. He smiled sadly. But we destroyed ourselves long ago. Used Rocky as a shield. Used you as a bank. I poured us both coffee in my grandmother's cups. Why are you here, Ernest? To show you something. He pulled out his phone, showing me a small apartment. My own place. First time in 40 years I'm living for myself. I'm glad for you. Rocky's living with his mother again, he added. Some patterns never break unless you break them yourself. After he left, I recorded a bonus episode for my podcast. The words flowed easily now. Sometimes the strongest boundaries are the ones we build after everything falls apart. Sometimes the greatest love we can show ourselves is walking away. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. My phone lit up with messages from listeners. Women sharing their stories. Women finding their strength. Women breaking their own patterns. I opened my balcony doors, letting in the evening air. Below, the city pulsed with life and possibility. My new home. My new story. The china gleamed in its cabinet. Not hidden away, but proudly displayed. Not a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd gained. Strength. Peace. Self-respect. And remember, ladies, I spoke into my recorder, preparing tomorrow's outro. If you're just the ATM, cancel the card and change the PIN, but most importantly, invest in yourself. I hit stop, smiling at my reflection in the window. No more forced smiles, no more silent rage. Just me, my voice, and a future I'd built from the ashes of a house that was never really a home.
Sign here, dear. It's just a formality. Those were Andrew's words 5 years ago as he slid the prenuptial agreement across his mahogany desk. Mont Blanc pen gleaming in his manicured hand. I remember how he smiled. That confident, charming smile that had won me over at the charity gala where we'd met. You do trust me, don't you, Sophie? Of course I trusted him. I was 28, freshly graduated from my MBA program, and head over heels in love with one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. Andrew Hamilton was everything I'd dreamed of. Successful, brilliant, and seemingly devoted to me. Now, standing in that same office, watching him pack his designer briefcase with one hand while texting his secretary with the other, I wondered how I could have been so blind. It's nothing personal, Sophie, he said, not even looking up from his phone. Jessica and we just connect on a different level. You understand. Jessica, his 23-year-old secretary who'd started working for him 8 months ago, the one he'd insisted on hiring personally, despite her conspicuous lack of qualifications. And the prenup? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. That was your plan all along, wasn't it? Now he did look up, that familiar smirk playing across his face. Smart girl. Always knew you were clever. He pulled a document from his desk drawer. 1 page, very clear. In the event of divorce, you get nothing. No alimony, no property rights, no shares in Hamilton Industries. You signed it, remember? I remembered. I also remembered how he'd rushed me through it, how he kept talking about the wedding plans, distracting me from the fine print. Good luck surviving, he added, shouldering his briefcase. Though I hear the library is hiring. You've always liked books, haven't you? He laughed as he walked out, leaving me alone in the office where I'd spent countless hours helping him build Hamilton Industries into what it was today. The company he'd now locked me out of with a single page of legal text. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan, my best friend, and, as luck would have it, a corporate lawyer. Just heard. Coming over now. Don't kisahin a. I sank into one of the plush office chairs, my mind racing. 5 years of marriage, of dedicating myself to Andrew's company, of putting my own career dreams on hold, all ended with a smirk and a 1-page prenup. Megan arrived like a whirlwind, her court heels clicking against the marble floors, her face flushed with anger. That bastard. I knew he was planning something when he started staying late with that Barbie doll secretary. She dropped her briefcase on the desk and pulled me into a fierce hug. Tell me everything. I did, starting with finding the texts on Andrew's iPad 2 weeks ago. Messages to Jessica about their future together. How he'd grown increasingly distant, working late, taking mysterious business trips. Then this morning's bombshell. Divorce papers delivered to my office, along with the prenup I'd signed 5 years ago. He said it's nothing personal. I finished bitterly. That Jessica understands him better. Understands his wallet. More like, Megan muttered, already flipping through the documents. Let me see this prenup he's so smug about. I handed it over, watching as her sharp eyes scanned the legal text. After a moment, she frowned. Something's off here, she said slowly. The formatting, it's not quite right. What do you mean? She held the page up to the light. See these margin marks? They don't align properly. And the page number. She pointed to a tiny 1 at the bottom. Why number a single page? My heart started beating faster. You think there's more? I think, Megan said, pulling out her phone. We need to talk to the lawyer who drafted this. Gerald Foster, according to the letterhead. And lucky for us, I know exactly where to find him. 2 hours later, we sat in Gerald Foster's cramped office in downtown Boston. He was older than I expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a body that looked like it had seen better days. Of course, I remember the Hamilton prenup, he said, pulling out a thick file. Quite an interesting document, actually. One of my last cases before retirement. Mr. Foster, Megan leaned forward. The copy my friend was given shows only 1 page, but you're indicating there was more. The old lawyer's eyes narrowed. 1 page? That's not possible. The original document was quite extensive. Multiple pages dealing with various contingencies, particularly regarding intellectual property and company holdings. My hands started trembling. Intellectual property? Yes, my dear. You see, Andrew was quite insistent about protecting his company's patents and trade secrets. But your father, clever man, your father, he insisted on adding some provisions of his own. My father, I whispered. But he died before the wedding. He never met Andrew. Foster smiled gently. Oh, he met him. 3 months before his death, your father came to me. He was concerned about Andrew's reputation in certain business circles. He wanted to make sure you were protected. He turned to his computer, typing slowly with 2 fingers. I should have the original scan somewhere. Ah, here we go. The printer whirred to life, producing several pages. Foster handed them to me with a flourish. Page 2 is particularly interesting. The one dealing with intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. I stared at the documents, my vision blurring slightly. There it was, page 2 of a prenup I'd never seen in its entirety. And what I read made my blood run cold. Megan, I said quietly, I need you to look at this. Now. She took the pages, her eyes widening as she read. Oh my God, she breathed. Sophie, do you know what this means? I did. I was beginning to understand exactly what my father had done, and why Andrew had been so careful to hide these pages from me. The smug smile, the rush to get me to sign, the careful distraction. It all made sense now. Mr. Foster, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need copies of everything. And then I need you to tell me exactly what my father said about Andrew Hamilton. The old lawyer's eyes twinkled. My dear, I thought you'd never ask. The next few hours were a crash course in corporate law and my father's foresight. Thomas Bennett hadn't built a successful tech company by being naive. He'd seen something in Andrew that had worried him, something that had prompted him to add very specific clauses to the prenup. Your father suspected Andrew was after more than just a marriage, Foster explained. He'd heard rumors about corporate espionage, about stolen patents. He couldn't prove anything. But he wanted to protect me, I finished. And his company's intellectual property. Precisely. The second page of the prenup includes a clause that any intellectual property belonging to Bennett Technologies would remain solely under your control in the event of a divorce, including patents developed using Bennett Tech. Megan was practically bouncing in her seat. Sophie, don't you see what this means? Hamilton Industries' biggest products, their whole AI division, it's all built on Bennett Technologies' original patents. I did see. I saw exactly why Andrew had hidden these pages, why he'd been so confident with his 1-page prenup. He thought he'd covered his tracks. He never knew, I said slowly. All these years, he never knew my father had outplayed him. Foster nodded. Thomas was very clear. These pages were to remain sealed unless Andrew initiated divorce proceedings. He said, and I quote, let him show his true colors first. My phone buzzed again. Andrew, probably calling to gloat or pressure me about the divorce papers. I let it go to voicemail, my mind already racing with possibilities. Megan, I said, turning to my friend, how quickly can we file a countersuit? She grinned, already pulling out her laptop. Give me an hour. By the time we're done, Andrew Hamilton won't know what hit him. I touched the papers reverently, thinking of my father. He'd seen through Andrew's charm, had put these protections in place even when I was too blinded by love to see the truth. One more thing, Foster said, pulling out another file. Your father left this for you. Said to give it to you when the time comes. I think the time is now. The envelope he handed me was thick, sealed with my father's company logo. Inside was a USB drive and a letter in his familiar handwriting. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, then Andrew has shown his true nature. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you through this, but I've left you everything you need to protect yourself. My father's letter trembled in my hands as I continued reading. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, then Andrew has shown his true nature. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you through this, but I've left you everything you need to protect yourself. The USB drive contains proof of what I suspected: Andrew's systematic theft of Bennett Technologies patents. Email trails, modified code, timestamps that prove our technology was developed first. He thought he was clever, but he didn't count on me keeping backup servers running even after the company's sale. I know this will hurt, sweetheart. You loved him, and he betrayed that love. But you're stronger than you know. You're my daughter, and Bennett's don't break. We rebuild. Use this information wisely. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, but justice served cold and clean. All my love, Dad. Megan was already plugging the USB drive into her laptop, her eyes widening as she scrolled through the files. Sophie, she breathed, this is incredible. Your father documented everything. Every patent Andrew stole, every piece of code he modified. He knew, I said softly. Dad knew what Andrew was planning all along. And he left you the perfect weapon. Megan turned the laptop so I could see. Look at this. Emails between Andrew and his development team discussing how to disguise the stolen Bennett tech. Timestamps proving your father's company developed these systems years before Hamilton Industries claimed them. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Andrew. This time, I answered, having second thoughts about the divorce. His smug voice made my skin crawl. Actually, I said calmly, I just had a fascinating meeting with Gerald Foster. Remember him? The lawyer who drafted our prenup? There was a slight pause. That old fool. What about him? He showed me something interesting. The full prenup. All the pages you conveniently forgot to show me 5 years ago. The silence on the other end was deafening. Sophie, he said finally, his tone carefully controlled. I don't know what you think you found, but page 2. I cut him off. The one about intellectual property rights. Specifically, Bennett Technologies patents. Ring any bells? I heard him inhale sharply. That's impossible. Those pages were destroyed. Apparently not. Oh, and Dad left me something else. A USB drive full of proof that Hamilton Industries' entire AI division is built on stolen technology. My technology, according to the prenup you signed. You're bluffing. But I could hear the fear creeping into his voice. Am I? Check your email. Megan just sent you a sample of what we have. I'll give you an hour to call me back. I hung up, my heart pounding but my hands steady. Megan grinned at me. That was badass. He'll call his lawyers immediately, I said, starting to pace. Try to find a way around this. Let him try. Megan was already typing furiously. I'm filing for an emergency injunction right now. By tomorrow morning, Hamilton Industries won't be able to use any of their AI systems without risking massive penalties. It took Andrew exactly 43 minutes to call back. What do you want? His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. A meeting. Tomorrow morning, your office. Bring your lawyers. And Jessica too. She should hear this. Fine. 9 a.m. Oh, and Andrew? Don't try anything clever. The evidence is already in safe hands. I spent that night in my home office, going through every file my father had left. The more I read, the more amazed I was at his foresight. He hadn't just documented the theft. He created a complete roadmap of how Hamilton Industries had integrated the stolen technology into their systems. By morning, I was ready. I dressed carefully in my sharpest suit. Valentino, bought with my own money from my years working before I met Andrew. The irony wasn't lost on me. Megan met me outside Hamilton Industries headquarters, alongside Gerald Foster and 2 other lawyers from her firm. Ready to take him down? I touched the USB drive in my pocket. Ready. Andrew's executive conference room was full when we arrived. He sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his legal team. Jessica was there too, looking uncomfortable in a dress that was trying too hard to be professional. "Let's make this quick," Andrew said, not bothering to stand. "Whatever you think you have." "Oh, I know exactly what I have," I interrupted, nodding to Megan. She started distributing folders to everyone in the room. "Page 1, I said clearly, is the prenup you showed me. Page 2, the one you hid, gives me full rights to any Bennett Technologies patents in the event of divorce. Pages 3 through 10 detail exactly how Hamilton Industries stole and modified those patents." Andrew's lawyers were flipping through the documents, their faces growing increasingly concerned. One of them leaned over to whisper something in Andrew's ear. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You can't prove." "Actually, we can prove everything." Megan connected her laptop to the room's display screen. "These are the original Bennett Technologies patents, filed 3 years before Hamilton Industries suddenly developed remarkably similar systems." For the next hour, we laid out our case methodically: the stolen code, the modified timestamps, the internal emails discussing how to disguise the theft. With each revelation, Andrew's face grew paler. Jessica watched the presentation with growing horror, finally standing up abruptly. I need to." "Stay," I said firmly. "You should hear this too. The company you think you're getting, it's built on theft, and it's about to come crashing down." One of Andrew's lawyers cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss settlement terms." "No." Andrew slammed his hand on the table. "I built this company. I made it what it is. You stole what my father built." I corrected him. "And now you have a choice. Either we do this the easy way, or we let the FBI's corporate fraud division handle it." Dad sent them copies of everything too. The room erupted in chaos. Lawyers huddling together, Andrew shouting about betrayal, Jessica slipping quietly out the door. Finally, Andrew's lead lawyer spoke. "What are your terms?" I pulled out another document, one I'd prepared last night. "Full control of Hamilton Industries' AEI division. It goes back to Bennett Technologies, which I still own. You keep the rest of the company, but you license our technology legally from now on. And," I smiled coldly, "I want a public statement acknowledging where the technology really came from." "You can't be serious," Andrew sputtered. "That division is worth billions." "It was worth billions when my father developed it too," I said quietly, "before you stole it." The negotiations took hours. By the end, Andrew was a shadow of the confident man who'd smirked at me yesterday. The final agreement was even better than I'd hoped. I got the AI division, a seat on Hamilton Industries board, and a public acknowledgement of Bennett Technologies' contributions. "One more thing," I said as the lawyers finished the paperwork. "The divorce settlement. I want the house." Andrew looked up, surprised. "The beach house? Why? It's barely worth." "It's where my father spent his last summer," I cut him off. "It matters to me. You can keep the penthouse. I'm sure Jessica will love it." That evening, I sat in my father's old study at the beach house, watching the sunset over the ocean. Megan had gone home, promising to handle all the legal follow-up. The day's events felt almost surreal. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "I'm sorry. I didn't know about any of this." I didn't respond. She'd learn her own lessons about Andrew soon enough. Opening my laptop, I logged into the Bennett Technologies servers for the first time in years. The familiar interface welcomed me home, and I could almost hear my father's voice guiding me through the code like he used to. Another text came through, this one from Andrew. "You'll regret this. You have no idea how to run a tech division." I smiled, thinking of all the nights I'd spent learning coding from my father, all the summers interning at Bennett Technologies before I met Andrew. He'd never bothered to ask about my background in tech. He just assumed I was another pretty face with a business degree. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of transitions. The press had a field day with the story. Hamilton Industries' AEI division returns to original innovator's daughter. Andrew's reputation in the business world was in shambles, and Jessica had already moved on to greener pastures. I threw myself into rebuilding Bennett Technologies, discovering that I remembered more of my father's lessons than I'd realized. The team welcomed me warmly, many of them old employees who'd worked with Dad. 1 month after the takeover, I stood in front of Bennett Technologies headquarters, now restored to its former glory. The sign above the door gleamed in the morning sun. Bennett Technologies, innovation with integrity. My phone buzzed, a message from Megan. "Andrew's trying to salvage what's left of Hamilton Industries. Apparently, their stock is tanking without the AEI division. Need any new clients?" I laughed, tucking the phone away. Let him struggle. I had more important things to focus on. That evening, I visited my father's grave, placing fresh flowers by the headstone. "You knew," I said softly. "You knew he tried to take everything, so you made sure I had what I needed to take it back." The wind rustled through the trees, and I could almost hear his response. "Bennetts don't break. We rebuild." As I drove back to the beach house, I thought about everything that had happened. Andrew had thought he was destroying me, but he'd actually set me free. Free to reclaim my father's legacy, free to prove what I was capable of. My father's letter sat framed on my desk now, a daily reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice, served exactly when it needs to be. The next morning, as I walked into my office at Bennett Technologies, my assistant handed me the latest market reports. Our stock was soaring. New clients were lined up for meetings, and the tech blogs were buzzing about our upcoming innovations. "Oh, and Miss Bennett?" she added with a smile. "Mr. Hamilton's office called. They want to discuss licensing terms for some of our new patents." I smiled, settling into my chair. "Tell them to send a proposal. And Sarah? Make sure they know our terms are non-negotiable." Looking out over the city skyline from my office, my father's old office, I felt a deep sense of peace. Andrew had tried to take everything from me, thinking I was just a naive girl he could manipulate. Instead, he'd given me back everything I was meant to have all along. Sometimes I mused, the best hidden pages are the ones written in our own hearts, just waiting for the right moment to be revealed.
When my father died 7 years ago, he left behind 3 things: a vintage car collection he'd spent his life building, a beautiful lakefront property that had been in his family for generations, and a daughter who missed him more than words could express. That's me, Deanna, and this is the story of how my own family tried to steal my inheritance right from under me. Dad was a master mechanic, the kind who could diagnose an engine problem just by listening. His garage was his sanctuary, filled with tools that felt like extensions of his hands and cars he'd lovingly restored over decades. Every weekend, he'd be out there tinkering with one vehicle or another, teaching me everything he knew. "Pay attention, princess," he'd say, gesturing for me to look closer at whatever he was working on. "Someday all this will be yours, and you'll need to know how to take care of it." I spent countless hours in that garage, learning about carburetors and timing belts, the difference between a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver, and most importantly, the value of patience and attention to detail. While other girls my age were playing with dolls, I was helping Dad restore a 1967 Mustang. My small hands perfect for reaching into tight spaces. Mom never understood our bond or our shared passion for cars. She was more interested in social status, in keeping up appearances. When Dad died of a sudden heart attack at 52, she waited exactly 11 months before marrying Stephen, her tennis instructor who was nearly 15 years her junior. I was 16 when Stephen moved in, bringing with him his 13-year-old daughter Amber from his first marriage. Suddenly, our quiet home became a different place entirely. Stephen and Mom spent money like water, buying new furniture, redecorating every room, trying to erase all traces of Dad's presence. The only places they didn't touch were the garage and the lake house. The garage because it's full of junk anyway, Mom's words, and the lake house because Dad's will had specific provisions about it. Or so I thought. You can't sell any of it until Diana turns 25, I overheard our family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, telling Mom shortly after Dad's funeral. James was very clear about that. I took comfort in knowing Dad had protected his legacy, had ensured that the things he loved would be preserved for me. I should have known better. I should have gotten copies of all the documents myself, should have paid more attention to the legal details instead of just trusting that everything would be handled properly. But I was 16 and grieving, more concerned with keeping Dad's cars running than with paperwork and legal provisions. Every afternoon after school, I'd head straight to the garage, working on the cars just like he taught me. It was my way of keeping him close, of honoring his memory. Meanwhile, Mom and Stephen threw themselves into transforming Amber from a quiet, bookish girl into their idea of the perfect daughter. Designer clothes, private tennis lessons, cotillion classes, nothing was too expensive when it came to Amber's development. Diana, honey, Mom would say, eyeing my oil-stained jeans with disapproval. Wouldn't you rather join Amber at her etiquette classes? It would be so much more appropriate than spending all your time in that garage. But I stayed true to what Dad had taught me. I kept his cars running, kept his tools organized just the way he liked them. The other kids at school thought it was weird, a girl spending so much time working on old cars. But I didn't care. Every time I got one of Dad's classics purring like new, I felt like he was right there with me, nodding in approval. After high school, I went to college for mechanical engineering, paying my way by working at a local auto shop. Mom and Stephen didn't offer to help with tuition. All their money was going toward Amber's future. I didn't mind. I was good at what I did, and the shop owner, Mike, appreciated having someone who understood vintage cars. "You've got the touch, kid," he'd say, watching me work. "Just like your old man." I came home as often as I could, mainly to check on the cars and visit the lake house. Each time, I noticed small changes. Tools missing from the garage, parts that had been there before suddenly gone. When I asked Mom about it, she'd wave off my concerns. "Oh, we needed to clear some space," she'd say vaguely. "You can't expect us to keep everything exactly the same forever, Diana." I should have pressed harder, should have demanded answers. But I was busy with school, with work, with trying to build my own life. And honestly, I still couldn't imagine that my own mother would go against Dad's wishes. Then came the day that changed everything. I was in my final semester of college when Mom called, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Diana, you'll never believe it. Amber's engaged. To Bradley Worthington ILI. You know, the Worthingtons of Worthington Investments." I made appropriate congratulatory noises while mentally calculating how long it would be before I could politely end the call. But Mom wasn't finished. "We're planning the most amazing wedding. The country club, a 10-piece orchestra, 500 guests. Of course, it's going to be quite expensive, but Stephen and I have figured out how to manage it." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "Mom, what do you mean you figured it out?" "Well," she paused, and I could picture her practicing her most persuasive smile. "We've had some interest in the lake property, and since it's just sitting there empty most of the time, you can't sell the lake house. I cut in. Dad's will." "Oh, that old thing." Stephen had his lawyer look it over. Apparently, there was some problem with how it was filed. Something about improper witnesses or incorrect paperwork. The point is, as James's widow, I have every right to sell it. And really, Diana, it's for the best. Amber needs this wedding to secure her future. Your father would have understood. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Mom, no. You can't. That property has been in Dad's family for generations. He wanted me to have it. Don't be selfish, Diana. Amber is your sister now, and this is her big moment. Besides, her voice took on that dismissive tone I'd grown to hate. What would you do with a lake house anyway? You're always covered in grease, playing with those old cars. This way, at least the property will serve a useful purpose. I hung up without responding, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Dad's voice echoed in my head. Someday all this will be yours. I grabbed my laptop and started searching through old emails, looking for anything from Mr. Patterson, any documentation about Dad's will. That's when I discovered something else. The vintage cars. Dad's pride and joy, the collection he'd spent his life building. Many of them were missing from the insurance documents. I called Mike at the shop, trying to keep my voice steady. Mike, I need a favor. Could you check something for me? Last time you were at my dad's garage, how many cars were there? There was a long pause. Diana, I was wondering when you'd ask about that. They've been selling them off, one by one. I tried to stop them, told them those cars were meant for you, but your stepdad said they had paperwork showing they had the right to sell. The room spun around me as Mike's words sank in. They've been selling Dad's cars. His life's work, his legacy to me, and they've been quietly disposing of it to fund their extravagant lifestyle and now Amber's wedding. I ended the call and sat in silence, staring at nothing. Then I opened my email and wrote 2 messages. The first was to my academic advisor asking for an emergency extension on my final projects. The second was to a lawyer I'd met at the auto shop, a classic car enthusiast who specialized in estate law. Need your help? I wrote. Family inheritance being sold without permission. How soon can we meet? The response came within minutes. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., bring any documentation you have. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad in his garage, teaching me about timing belts and distributors, showing me how to diagnose engine problems by sound and feel. Pay attention, princess, he'd said. Someday all this will be yours. Well, Dad, I thought as I finally drifted off, I'm paying attention now, and I'm not letting them take what you meant for me to have. The law office of Marcus Bennett looked exactly like you'd expect. Leather chairs, dark wood paneling, and walls lined with legal texts. But there was something else too. Framed photos of classic cars, including a gorgeous 1965 Shelby Cobra that made my heart ache. It reminded me of the one Dad and I had been planning to restore together. That's my baby, Marcus said, following my gaze. Spent 3 years bringing her back to life. Your friend Mike tells me you know your way around engines? I nodded, still staring at the photo. My dad taught me everything I know, or at least he tried to before. I swallowed hard. Before they started selling off his collection. Marcus's friendly smile faded, replaced by a look of focused intensity. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. For the next hour, I walked him through it all. Dad's death, the will's provisions about waiting until I was 25, the gradual disappearance of the cars, and now their plan to sell the lake house for Amber's wedding. Do you have a copy of the will? He asked. I shook my head. Mom and Stephen said there were problems with how it was filed. Something about improper witnesses. Marcus frowned. That's concerning. Who was your father's lawyer? Mr. Patterson. But when I tried calling his office yesterday, they said he retired 2 years ago, moved to Florida. George Patterson. Marcus sat up straighter. I know George. He's meticulous about documentation. If he handled your father's will, there's no way there were problems with how it was filed. Hope flickered in my chest. Can you find out for sure? I can do better than that. He reached for his phone. George and I play golf whenever he's in town. Let me give him a call. 20 minutes later, Marcus had answers that made my blood boil. George never retired to Florida, he said grimly. He's been working part-time at his son's firm across town. And he definitely never told your mother there were problems with the will. In fact, he's been trying to reach you for months. Your mother told his office you were studying abroad and couldn't be contacted. My hands clenched into fists. They lied. About everything. It gets worse, Marcus continued. George says your father set up a trust, not just a will. The cars, the lake house, even the tools in the garage. They're all held in trust for you. Your mother and stepfather have no legal right to sell any of it. But they have been selling it, I said, my voice shaking. The cars, the tools. How many laws have they broken? Several. Marcus was already typing on his computer, selling property held in trust without authorization. That's fraud. Using the proceeds for personal benefit? More fraud. Making false statements about the trust's existence? You get the picture. What can we do? First, we need documentation. Records of what's been sold, when to whom for how much. Bank statements showing where the money went. Then we can file for an emergency injunction to stop the lake house sale and start proceedings to recover what's been taken. I thought about the missing cars, the empty spaces in Dad's garage. Can we get them back? Some maybe, others might be gone for good. But we can get financial compensation, possibly with punitive damages. He looked at me seriously. This won't be easy. They're family. Are you sure you want to pursue this? They stopped being family the moment they started stealing my inheritance, I said firmly. Dad trusted me to take care of his legacy. I won't let him down. The next few weeks were a blur of investigation and documentation. Marcus's team tracked down sales records for 11 of Dad's cars, worth over $800,000 combined. They found receipts for tools and equipment sold at various auctions. Most stunning of all, they discovered the money trail, deposits into Mom and Steven's personal accounts, transfers to wedding vendors, payments for Amber's new car and luxury apartment. Meanwhile, I took a leave of absence from my final semester, promising my professors I'd make up the work over the summer. This was more important. This was about justice. I moved back home, watching Mom and Steven's mounting panic as they realized they couldn't reach the lawyer who'd supposedly found problems with Dad's will, because he didn't exist. They'd forged documents, created a fake law firm's letterhead, all to convince me they had the right to sell my inheritance. Diana, sweetie, Mom cornered me in the kitchen one morning, her smile brittle. About the lake house, I know you're upset, but try to understand. Amber's wedding is so important. It's her chance at a perfect life. Like my life doesn't matter. I kept my voice neutral, recording every word on my phone. Like Dad's wishes don't matter. Your father would have wanted to help his stepdaughter, she insisted. He was generous that way. Really? I pulled out my phone, showing her a photo from my investigation. Is that why you sold his prized 1969 Chevelle to fund your spa weekend in Palm Springs? Because Dad was generous? The color drained from her face. How did you? I know everything, Mom. Every car you sold. Every lie you told. Every dollar you stole. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. We did not steal anything. We are your parents. We have every right. You might want to let go of me, I said quietly. And you might want to talk to a lawyer, a real one this time. That evening, I heard them arguing behind closed doors. Amber's voice joined in, shrill and panicked. What do you mean the wedding might have to be canceled? The Worthingtons will never forgive us. Bradley's mother has already ordered custom ice sculptures. We'll figure something out, Stephen promised. Diana's just being difficult. She'll come around. I smiled grimly, thinking of the documents in Marcus's office. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I went to the garage early, wanting to spend time with what remained of Dad's collection. In the corner, under a dusty tarp, I found his favorite, a 1957 Chevy Bel Air we'd restored together during my high school years. They hadn't sold this one, probably because it needed work. The engine was in pieces, parts scattered across his old workbench. I ran my hand along the car's faded paint, remembering Dad's voice. Patience, princess. Sometimes you have to take things apart completely before you can put them back together the right way. He'd been talking about engines, but the lesson felt especially relevant now. I was taking apart the lies, the fraud, the betrayal, piece by piece. Soon, I'd have enough evidence to rebuild the truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bringing George Patterson. Time to drop the hammer. I texted back a simple, and got to work on the Bel Air's engine. Tomorrow would bring chaos, but today I could lose myself in the familiar rhythm of wrenches and ratchets, honoring Dad's memory the best way I knew how. As I worked, I heard Mom and Steven leaving for a wedding planning session at the country club. They had no idea that while they were picking out flower arrangements and table settings, Marcus's team was serving subpoenas to every auction house, every dealer, every buyer who'd been involved in their scheme. The truth was coming, whether they were ready or not. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at Marcus's office early. Through the window, I watched Mom, Stephen, and Amber pull up in Stephen's BMW. They looked confident, probably expecting to steamroll over any objections I might have about the lake house sale. Mom was wearing her handling difficult situations outfit, a powder blue suit that made her look both authoritative and approachable. Stephen had on his tennis club blazer, a symbol of the status he so desperately craved. Amber was clutching a wedding planning binder thick enough to stop bullets. Marcus met them in the lobby while I waited in the conference room with George Patterson. The elderly lawyer looked nothing like the frail retiree my mother had described. His eyes were sharp, his grip firm as he shook my hand. "Your father was a good man," he said quietly. "He trusted your mother to honor his wishes. I'm sorry she didn't." Before I could respond, the door opened. Mom's confident smile faltered when she saw George. Stephen's face went slack with shock. Amber just looked confused. "Mr. Patterson?" Mom's voice was higher than usual. "What are you doing here?" "Interesting question, Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus said, closing the door behind them. "Especially since you told your daughter he was retired in Florida." "There must be some misunderstanding," Stephen started, but Marcus cut him off. "Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." They sat. I noticed Mom's hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her skirt. She knew. She knew exactly what was coming. Marcus opened a thick folder. "Let's start with the trust your late husband established for Diana, the one you claimed didn't exist." "We never," Mom began, but George Patterson spoke over her. "I have here the original trust documents, properly witnessed and filed. James Mitchell was very specific about his wishes. The entire car collection, the lake property, and all related assets were to be held in trust for Diana until she turned 25. He slid copies across the table. I watched as Mom and Stephen's faces grew paler with each page. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "we have documented evidence of unauthorized sales of trust assets." He began laying out photographs. The 1969 Chevelle sold to fund a spa vacation. The 1965 Mustang sold to pay for Amber's apartment. The 1970 Challenger sold to cover country club dues. Amber's eyes widened. "Mom? Dad? What's he talking about?" And most recently, Marcus pressed on, attempts to sell the lake house to pay for an extravagant wedding. A wedding, I might add, that's being financed with stolen money. "Stolen?" Amber shrieked. "What do you mean stolen?" "He means," I said quietly, "that they've been selling off my inheritance piece by piece. Dad's cars, his tools, everything he worked for. They sold it all without having any legal right to do so." "That's ridiculous." Stephen slammed his hand on the table. "We had every right. The will was invalid." "Was it?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to explain these?" He produced more documents, the forged letters, the fake law firm letterhead they used to convince me they had authority to sell. "Document forgery," he noted clinically, "wire fraud, conversion of trust assets, the list goes on." Mom's facade finally cracked. We needed the money. Stephen's tennis business wasn't doing well, and Amber deserved a wedding paid for with stolen funds. I cut in. "Is that what she deserved?" Amber burst into tears. "The Worthingtons will never forgive us. Bradley's mother has already ordered the ice sculptures." "Yes, we know." I sighed. "Maybe you should have checked where the money was coming from before spending it." "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "First, all sales of trust assets stop immediately. The lake house is off the market as of this morning." "But," Stephen started. "Second," Marcus continued as if he hadn't spoken, "you will provide a full accounting of every item sold, every dollar received, and every penny spent. Mr. Patterson and I will be auditing everything." "You can't do this." Mom's voice rose desperately. "We're family." "Family?" I stood up slowly. "Was it family when you sold Dad's Chevelle, the car we restored together during my senior year? Was it family when you lied about Mr. Patterson retiring so you could steal my inheritance? Was it family when you tried to sell the lake house where Dad taught me to swim?" "Deanna, please." Mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. "The really sad thing is, if you just asked, I might have helped with Amber's wedding. Not by selling Dad's legacy, but maybe we could have found another way." But you didn't ask. You just took. What about my wedding? Amber wailed. It's in 6 weeks. I suggest you start making cancellations, Marcus said firmly, unless you want to add receiving stolen property to the family's legal troubles. We can still fix this, Stephen tried, his voice wheedling. Deanna, be reasonable. Think about your mother, your sister. Stepsister, I corrected. And the time for being reasonable was before you started stealing from me. Marcus laid out more papers, court orders, injunctions, demands for repayment. You have 24 hours to sign these and begin cooperation. After that, we go to the police. The police? Mom went white. You'd send us to jail? You sent yourselves to jail, I said quietly. Every time you sold one of Dad's cars. Every time you lied about the trust. Every time you chose your new family over his wishes. They left the meeting in shambles. Mom crying, Stephen ashen-faced. Amber having a complete meltdown about her ruined wedding. I watched them go, feeling oddly empty. This was victory, but it didn't feel like one. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Marcus's team tracked down most of the cars, though some had been resold and were impossible to recover. The lake house was safe, its attempted sale nullified. Mom and Stephen had to remortgage their house to start repaying what they'd stolen. Amber's wedding was canceled, and with it her engagement. Apparently, Bradley Worthington Aya's family had no interest in being associated with criminals. Their word, not mine. She moved back in with her mother, her dreams of social climbing shattered. Mr. Patterson helped me set up proper oversight of the trust, ensuring no one could ever steal from it again. When I finally walked through Dad's garage, now partially refilled with recovered cars, I felt his presence stronger than ever. The 1957 Bel Air still sat in a corner, waiting to be restored. I ran my hand along its fender, remembering all the hours Dad and I had spent working on it together. I did it, Dad, I whispered. I protected what you built. I wished it hadn't cost me my family. But then again, maybe they were never really my family to begin with. Family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't lie to you. Family doesn't try to take what someone worked their whole life to build. 1 year later, I finally graduated from engineering school. The ceremony was small, just me, my professors, and a few friends from the auto shop. Mom sent a card. I returned it unopened. The lake house has become my weekend retreat, a place where I can work on cars in peace, surrounded by the memories of the person who taught me everything important about life. The value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Sometimes late at night, I sit in Dad's old garage, surrounded by the cars we love together, and I know I made the right choice. Some things are worth more than money. Legacy, honor, truth. Mom and Stephen never understood that. Last week, I finished restoring the Bel Air. As I took it for its first drive, the engine purring exactly the way Dad taught me it should, I felt at peace. They may have taken some things from me, but they couldn't take what mattered most. The knowledge, the memories, the love of something real and honest and true. The legal battles aren't quite over. There are still assets to recover, money to be repaid. Mom occasionally tries to reach out, usually when she needs something. I let those calls go to voicemail. Some people say I was too harsh, that family deserves forgiveness. Maybe they're right. But as I sit in my father's restored garage, surrounded by the legacy he entrusted to me, I know that forgiveness has to be earned. It can't be stolen, like everything else they tried to take. Dad always said every car has a story. Mine is about betrayal and justice, about standing up for what's right even when it hurts. But mostly it's about honoring the person who taught me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The trust comes into my full control next year when I turn 25. By then, the garage will be completely restored, every car back where it belongs. And maybe then, with time and distance, I'll be ready to think about forgiveness. But for now, I'm content to be my father's daughter, keeper of his legacy, protector of the dreams he built one car at a time. Some might call it just a collection of old cars and a lake house. But to me, it's everything my father was, honest, hardworking, true. And that's worth more than all the wedding ice sculptures in the world. The morning sun filtered through the cafe's windows, casting long shadows across the empty tables. I stood behind the counter, running my fingers over the worn wood where thousands of coffee cups had left their mark over the years. In a few hours, I would have to hand over the keys to my slice of heaven, the Morning Light Cafe. Sarah, you know this is for the best, Margaret Richardson said, adjusting her designer scarf with manicured fingers. My mother-in-law had the remarkable ability to make even sympathy sound condescending. Running a cafe is hardly suitable for a widow in your position. My position. As if losing James 3 months ago had somehow diminished me, transformed me from a successful business owner into someone who needed their protection and guidance. The Richardsons had never approved of their son marrying a small-town baker, as they liked to call me, though they'd managed to hide their disdain better when James was alive. The cafe is doing well, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Our revenue has actually increased since we added the new breakfast menu. Dear, Margaret sighed, sharing a knowing look with her husband George, who stood examining our local art wall like he was appraising garage sale items. The numbers you think are doing well are barely surviving. The property taxes alone in this area. I bit back her response. They had no idea about the property taxes because I had never shown them the real books. James and I had kept certain aspects of the cafe's operation private, knowing his parents' tendency to meddle. If they knew the truth about our financial situation, about the plans we'd made. But James was gone now, taken by a sudden heart attack at 34, and his parents had spent the last 3 months systematically dismantling everything we built together. The papers are ready, George announced, finally turning from his inspection of local artwork. Mr. Phillips will be here at noon to finalize the sale. Mr. Phillips, their family lawyer who had appeared with suspicious speed after James's death, armed with documents showing that the Richardsons had some claim to the cafe through a complex web of family trust agreements. I still wasn't sure how they'd managed it, but they'd made it clear that fighting them would cost more than I could afford. I need to finish packing, I said, turning away to hide the tears threatening to spill. The storage room still held boxes of James's things, recipes we developed together, photos of our early days when the cafe was just a dream, the special roasting equipment he'd surprised me with on our last anniversary. Don't worry about any of that, Margaret said briskly. We'll have people handle the clearance. You should focus on finding alternative employment. The way she said it made it clear she had something specific in mind. Probably the receptionist position at George's law firm that she'd been none too subtly suggesting. A respectable job, as she put it. I waited until they left before allowing myself to break down. Sliding down behind the counter, I pulled out the worn leather notebook James and I had used to plan our future. Inside, behind the recipe notes and profit projections, was a letter from the city planning department dated just 2 weeks before James died. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, it began. Regarding your inquiry about the proposed downtown development project. James had been so excited when we first heard rumors about the city's plans. Our cafe sat at the corner of what would become the centerpiece of a massive urban renewal project. The entire block would be transformed into a modern shopping and entertainment district. We had attended city council meetings in secret, gathering information, making plans. The property values would skyrocket once the project was announced. Several developers had already made discreet inquiries, offering to buy the building for well above market value. But we had bigger plans. I pulled out another document from the notebook. Architectural plans for an expanded version of Morning Light, incorporating the neighboring vacant lot we quietly purchased through a shell company James had set up. The new cafe would have been spectacular, with rooftop seating overlooking the planned central plaza. A knock at the front door startled me from my memories. Looking up, I saw David Chen, our regular customer and local real estate attorney, peering through the glass. I quickly wiped my eyes and let him in. I heard about the sale, he said without preamble. Sarah, you can't let them do this. I don't have a choice, I replied, automatic response worn smooth from repetition. They found some clause in the family trust. There's always a choice, David insisted, pulling out a thick folder from his briefcase. I've been looking into the property records. The way they're trying to claim ownership through the trust is questionable at best. If you let me help. I shook my head. I can't afford a legal battle, David. They'd drain me dry before we ever got to court. He started to argue but stopped, noticing something in my expression. David had been more than just a customer over the years. He'd become a friend, someone who understood the subtle dynamics at play. There's something you're not telling me, he said slowly. I glanced at the clock, 10:45 a.m. The sale would be finalized in just over an hour. Part of me wanted to tell David everything, to share the secret James and I had kept so carefully. But the other part, the part that had spent weeks planning this moment, knew better. "Just promise me one thing," I said, pulling an envelope from under the counter. "Deliver this to Margaret and George in exactly 2 months." David took the envelope, frowning. "Sarah, what are you?" "Promise me," I insisted. 2 months from today, no sooner." He tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket, still looking concerned. "At least let me look over the sale documents before you sign. Make sure they're not." "It's done." I cut him off. "The terms are set. Just trust me on this." After David left, I spent the remaining time walking through the cafe, touching each table, each piece of equipment. The antique espresso machine James had restored himself. The wall of customer photos we'd accumulated over 5 years of business. The hidden corner table where he proposed, getting down on one knee with a ring nestled in a coffee cup. At precisely noon, the bell above the door chimed. Mr. Phillips entered, followed by Margaret and George, all three impeccably dressed for what they clearly saw as a victory lap. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Phillips asked, spreading documents across our largest table. I sat down across from them, the leather notebook clutched in my lap like a shield. Margaret was already talking about their plans for the space. Some pretentious wine bar concept that would elevate the neighborhood. If only they knew. I signed where indicated, each stroke of the pen feeling like a betrayal and a triumph all at once. James would have understood. He would have seen the beautiful irony of it all. "Here are the keys," I said, placing them on the table. "The property's all yours." "Sarah," Margaret said, her voice dripping with insincere concern. "I know this is difficult, but you'll see we're right. This is really the best thing for everyone." I stood gathering my few remaining belongings. At the door, I turned back one last time, taking in the sight of them examining their new acquisition like vultures picking over prey. "You're right about one thing," I said softly. "This really is for the best." They didn't even look up as I left, didn't notice the small smile playing at my lips. In exactly 2 months, they would understand exactly what they'd bought and what they'd lost. But for now, I had a plan to set in motion and a promise to keep to James. The game was only beginning. 2 weeks after the sale, I sat in my small apartment reviewing the documents James and I had spent years gathering. Property assessments, zoning ordinances, environmental impact studies, all carefully organized in color-coded folders. The wall above my desk was covered in maps and city planning documents showing exactly why our little corner cafe was worth far more than the Richardsons realized. My phone buzzed. A message from David. "They've started renovations. Margaret's supervising personally." I smiled, imagining my mother-in-law micromanaging the contractors, completely unaware of what lay beneath the cafe's foundation. The geological surveys we'd commissioned had confirmed it. Our property sat at the only viable access point for the underground parking structure central to the city's development plan. Without our land, the entire project would have to be redesigned at massive expense. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Amy, my former head barista and closest confidant. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. On the screen was Margaret Richardson's latest social media post, a photo of her standing in front of Morning Light, now stripped of its signage. The caption read, "Exciting changes coming. The Richardson Wine Bar will bring sophistication to this neglected neighborhood." "Neglected?" I muttered. "We have lines around the block every morning." "There's more," Amy said, scrolling through photos. "They're gutting everything, even the original hardwood floors James restored." The mention of James sent a familiar pang through my chest. He would have hated seeing his beloved cafe dismantled, but he also would have appreciated the irony of what was coming. "Have they found it yet?" I asked. Amy shook her head. "No sign they've discovered the basement vault. Though they did hit a snag when they tried to remove the espresso bar. Apparently it's anchored deeper than they expected." Of course it was. James had installed that bar himself, making sure it concealed the entrance to the vault where we kept our most important documents, including the original property deed with its very special clause. "Any word from City Hall?" I asked, turning back to my wall of documents. "Nothing public yet, but my cousin in the planning department says the announcement is coming soon. They're just waiting for the final environmental impact reports." I nodded, checking my calendar. 6 weeks until David would deliver my envelope to the Richardsons. The timing had to be perfect. Just then, my phone rang. Margaret's number. I had ignored her calls since the sale, but something told me to answer this one. Sarah. Her voice held an unfamiliar note of tension. We need to discuss something about the property. I believe the sale was final. I replied coolly. The property is yours now. Yes, well, she paused. We've encountered some structural issues during renovations. The contractor found some kind of reinforced room beneath the main floor. The plans you provided didn't show any basement level. I smiled. You mean the plans your lawyer provided? The ones your son helped me falsify before he died. The silence on the other end was satisfying. What'd you just say? Margaret's voice had gone sharp. Nothing you need to worry about, I said sweetly. The property is yours now, structural surprises and all. Good luck with the wine bar. I hung up before she could respond, my heart racing. The game was entering its next phase. That evening, I met David at a small diner across town. The envelope I'd given him sat between us on the table as he reviewed the documents I brought. This is incredible, he said, examining the original property deed. The clause about mineral and development rights and the geographic survey results. Sarah, do you realize what this means? It means the Richardsons bought a surface property without reading the fine print. I replied. Everything below ground level, including the access rights the city needs for their project, still belongs to me. David shook his head in amazement. James helped you set this up. It was his idea originally. We knew his parents would try something if anything happened to him. They never could accept that he chose a different path from their plans. I thought back to the days when James first told his parents he was leaving their law firm to open a cafe with me. The look of disgust on George's face, Margaret's tears and accusations. They had spent years trying to control him through the family trust, never realizing he was always one step ahead. The city will announce the development project next week, David said, checking his phone. Once they do, property values in the area will skyrocket. The Richardsons will think they've hit the jackpot. Until they try to sell, finished, and discover they can't without my approval. The development can't proceed without the underground access rights, and those belong to me. They'll fight it, David warned. They have resources, connections. And I have this, I said, pulling out one final document, a letter in James's handwriting, dated just days before his death. It detailed everything. His parents' attempts to control him through financial manipulation, their threats when he refused to fall in line, and most importantly, his decision to protect our future by separating the property rights. 2 more weeks, I said, glancing at the calendar. Then the envelope gets delivered. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Through Amy's network of loyal customers, I kept tabs on the Richardsons' renovation progress. They had finally discovered the vault, but the reinforced door had stymied their attempts to open it. Margaret was apparently furious, convinced I was hiding something valuable inside. She wasn't wrong, but she was looking in the wrong direction. 1 week before the envelope's delivery date, the city made its announcement. The downtown development project was unveiled with great fanfare. $1 billion investment that would transform our quiet neighborhood into a bustling urban center. Property values doubled overnight. Real estate agents began circling like sharks, making offers on any available space. The Richardson social media exploded with self-congratulatory posts about their investment vision in acquiring the cafe. I watched it all from my apartment, adding each new development to my wall of evidence. The city's plans now included detailed renderings of the underground parking structure, accessible only through our property. Engineers had confirmed there was no alternate route that wouldn't require demolishing historic buildings. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Ms. Mitchell. The voice belonged to Daniel Morgan, chief developer for the city project. We need to discuss the property at 425 Oak Street. The Richardson Wine Bar? I asked innocently. Yes, well, that's partly why I'm calling. We've discovered some complications with the property rights. Our records show you still hold title to certain aspects of the land. I sat back in my chair, James's letter on the desk before me. I'm aware. We'd like to set up a meeting to discuss acquisition of those rights. The project timeline is rather urgent. Of course, I said. But I should warn you, I've already received several offers. He named a figure that made my heart skip. I countered with a higher one. By the end of the call, we had a tentative agreement that would make me a very wealthy woman. But it wasn't about the money. It never had been. 2 days before the envelope's scheduled delivery, Margaret showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked different, her usual perfect composure cracked around the edges. "What are you playing at?" she demanded as soon as I opened the door. "The city's developers keep talking about complications with the property." "What did you do?" I let her in, watching as she took in my wall of documents, her eyes widening as she began to understand. "James helped me protect our investment," I said simply. "He knew you tried to take the cafe after he was gone. So we made sure you could only take what we were willing to give up." "You can't do this," she whispered. "The property is ours. We have the paperwork." "You have the surface rights," I corrected. "Everything below ground, including the access rights the city needs for their billion-dollar project, belongs to me. James made sure of that before he died." Margaret sank onto my couch, her designer outfit suddenly looking out of place in my modest apartment. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. "Why would he do this to us?" "To you?" I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "You spent years trying to control him, belittling his choices, using the family trust to manipulate him. He built something real, something honest, and you couldn't stand it." "We were protecting him," she protested. "The cafe, it was so beneath him." "The cafe was his dream," I cut in. "Our dream. And now it's going to pay for everything we planned together." I handed her a copy of the city's development plans, watching as she realized the full implications. The property she thought they'd snatch away from me for a bargain price was worthless without the rights I still held. "George will fight this," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Good," I replied, "because in 2 days you're going to receive some very interesting documents. Things James wanted you to see after you showed your true colors." She left looking shaken, her perfect world crumbling around her. I watched from my window as she got into her luxury car, hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. The next day, I visited James's grave, bringing his favorite coffee blend and the news he would have loved to hear. "We did it," I whispered, touching the cool stone. "Everything we planned, everything we built. It's all working out exactly as you said it would." In less than 24 hours, David would deliver the envelope that would change everything. Inside were copies of every document proving the Richardsons' manipulation, James's letter detailing their threats, and most importantly, proof that he had outsmarted them one final time. The game was almost over, and justice was about to be served in ways they never saw coming. The morning David was scheduled to deliver the envelope, I sat in his office watching the security feed from the Richardsons' law firm on his laptop. At precisely 9 a.m., he walked into their plush reception area, envelope in hand. "They're all gathered in the conference room," he told me through our phone connection. "George, Margaret, their lawyers, even some of the senior partners." "Perfect," I replied, my heart racing. Just like James would have wanted. The feed showed David being escorted into the conference room. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Margaret's face go pale as she opened the envelope. George grabbed the documents from her hands, his expression darkening with each page he read. Inside that envelope was everything. Proof that James had legally separated the surface and subsurface property rights years ago. Documentation of the Richardsons' attempts to manipulate him through the family trusts, and most devastatingly, James's final letter to his parents. "Dear Mother and Father," it began. "If you're reading this, then everything has happened exactly as I predicted. You've tried to take what Sarah and I built, thinking you could simply sweep in and claim it as your own. But I've spent years preparing for this moment, protecting our legacy from your greed." My phone buzzed. A message from Amy. "You need to see this. They're tearing up the cafe floor." Attached was a photo showing contractors breaking through the hardwood, revealing the reinforced concrete beneath. They were obviously looking for something, not realizing that the real treasure wasn't in the vault they'd discovered. Back on the security feed, I watched George stand up suddenly, his face contorted with rage. The other lawyers were passing documents around, their expressions growing more concerned by the minute. "They just found the property records," David narrated. "They're realizing that without the subsurface rights, they can't sell to any developers. The wine bar is worthless." Another message from Amy. "City inspectors just showed up. They're posting notices about required permits for structural modifications." Everything was falling into place exactly as James had planned. The Richardsons had been so eager to seize control of the cafe that they hadn't bothered with proper due diligence. Now their rushed renovations were about to cost them dearly. My phone rang. Daniel Morgan from the City Development Office. "Ms. Mitchell," he said without preamble. "We've reviewed your counteroffer for the subsurface rights. The council has approved the full amount." I smiled, thinking of the number we discussed, nearly 3 times what the Richardsons had paid for the entire cafe. "When would you like to meet to finalize the paperwork?" I asked. "That's actually why I'm calling," he replied. "The Richardsons' lawyers just contacted us. They're claiming fraud, saying the property rights separation wasn't properly disclosed during the sale." "Check the sales contract," I said calmly. "Page 17, paragraph 3, subsection B. They signed off on acquiring surface rights only to the property. It's in black and white." The security feed showed George storming out of the conference room, phone pressed to his ear. Moments later, my phone rang again. His number. "You planned this," he snarled when I answered. "You and James, you set us up." "No, George," I replied evenly. "You set yourselves up. You were so convinced you could bully and manipulate your way to what you wanted that you never bothered to read what you were actually buying." "We'll fight this," he threatened. "We have resources." "So do I." I cut in. "Thanks to you, actually. The money you paid for the cafe surface rights, James and I used it to hire the best property rights attorneys in the state. Would you like their numbers?" After he hung up, I watched through the security feed as he returned to the conference room. The other lawyers were packing up their briefcases, clearly wanting no part of what was coming. Margaret sat alone at the table, still reading James's letter. Through the grainy footage, I could see tears running down her face. By afternoon, news of the development project had hit the local media. Property values in the area soared even higher as details of the planned transformation emerged. The Richardsons' wine bar concept, which had seemed pretentious before, now looked hopelessly out of place in what would become the city's premier shopping and entertainment district. I met Amy for coffee at our old rival cafe across town. She handed me her phone, showing social media lighting up with the story. "They're saying the Richardsons got conned," she said, scrolling through comments. "But anyone who knows the real story is celebrating. You should see what your old customers are saying." I smiled, remembering all the regulars who had supported us over the years, who had understood what morning light meant to the community. They would appreciate the justice of it all. A text from David interrupted our conversation. "Margaret's here. She wants to talk." 20 minutes later, I walked into David's office to find my mother-in-law sitting alone, looking smaller and older than I remembered. James' letter lay on the table between us. "Why didn't he tell us," she asked quietly, "about the development plans, about what you were building together?" "Would you have listened?" I countered. "Or would you have tried to take control of that too?" She dabbed at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. "We thought we were protecting him. The family name, the legacy." "James built his own legacy," I said firmly. "Morning Light wasn't just a cafe. It was proof that he could succeed on his own terms, without your money or connections." "And now," she asked, "what happens now?" I pulled out the city's final offer for the subsurface rights, sliding it across the table. Her eyes widened at the number. "This is what you'll be fighting if you pursue legal action," I explained. "Every major developer in the city wants these rights. They'll wait years while you tie things up in court. But in the end, the property laws are clear. James made sure of that." "And the letter?" Her voice cracked. "The things he wrote about us, about how we treated him. That was his gift to you," I said softly. "One last chance to understand who he really was, what really mattered to him." I left her there with the letter and the contract, knowing she had decisions to make. The Richardsons could fight, spend years and fortunes in court, but they couldn't change what James had done. He had protected our dream, ensuring it would survive even without him. 2 weeks later, I stood watching as workers removed the Richardson wine bar sign from the cafe's facade. The sale of the subsurface rights had been finalized, making me wealthy enough to buy back the surface rights at twice what they had paid. Morning Light would reopen exactly as James and I had planned. The new design incorporated both the historic building and modern elements that would complement the development project. The rooftop garden we had dreamed of would happen after all. Amy supervised as our old equipment was moved back in, including James's beloved espresso machine. The contractors had never managed to open the vault, which was fine, Its contents had served their purpose. David joined me as I unlocked the front door, the familiar bell chiming above. They're still in shock, he said, referring to the Richardsons. George retired from the firm yesterday. Margaret hasn't been seen at the country club in weeks. I ran my hand along the counter, remembering all the mornings James and I had spent here, planning our future between serving customers. It was never about hurting them, I said. James just wanted them to understand that success doesn't always look the way they imagined it. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting the same warm light that had given the cafe its name. On the wall, I hung a new photo. James on opening day 5 years ago, his smile radiant as he served our first customer. Below it, I placed a framed copy of the city's development plans showing Morning Light as the cornerstone of the transformed neighborhood. Exactly as we had envisioned it. My phone buzzed, a message from Margaret. He would be proud of you, of what you've built, what you protected. Maybe it was a start. Maybe understanding comes in small moments, in realizations that arrive too late but matter anyway. I began preparing for our reopening, measuring coffee beans into the grinder James had calibrated perfectly. The familiar aroma filled the air as customers began lining up outside, drawn by the grand reopening sign and the promise of something both old and new. Morning Light would shine again, brighter than ever. Not just as a cafe, but as proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply staying true to your dreams, protecting what matters, and letting justice unfold in its own perfect time. James had known that all along. Now everyone else did too. Ready to open? Emmy asked, tying on her apron. I touched the wedding ring I wore on a chain around my neck, feeling James's presence in every corner of the space we had created together. More than ready, I replied, turning the sign to open. The morning light streamed in, and with it came the future we had planned. Different than we'd imagined, but no less beautiful for the change. Sometimes the fine print isn't about what you're giving up, but what you're protecting. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the battle, but in the quiet wisdom of preparing for it. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice tastes exactly like a perfect cup of coffee, served exactly where it was always meant to be. Absolutely not, Sarah. I don't care what kind of personal emergency you think you have. The Peterson account presentation is next week, and I need everyone focused and present. Victoria Marshall's voice cut through the air like a knife, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her mahogany desk as she stared me down. I stood my ground, clutching the medical leave request form in my trembling hands. Ms. Marshall, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. The patient. She interrupted, her red lips curling into a sneer. You're an account executive, Sarah, not a nurse. Whatever medical drama you're caught up in isn't our concern. This is a marketing firm, not a charity. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I understand that, but this is different. He has no one else, and his condition is deteriorating rapidly. I just need 1 week. Enough. Victoria slammed her hand on the desk, making me jump. I've heard enough of your excuses. You've been distracted for weeks, taking long lunches, leaving early. Now you want a whole week off right before our biggest presentation of the year. The answer is no. I felt my chest tighten. Victoria had always been harsh, but this was different. This was cruel. Ms. Marshall, I've never taken a sick day in 3 years. I've worked every holiday, every weekend you've asked. I'm just asking for this one. 1 week that could cost us millions, she cut in, standing up to her full height. At 5'10" in her designer heels, she towered over me. Do you have any idea what the Peterson account means to this firm? Of course you don't. You're too wrapped up in your little humanitarian project to see the bigger picture. The way she said humanitarian project made it sound like a dirty word. I thought about the man lying in a hospital bed across town, his kind eyes and gentle smile despite the pain he was in. He didn't deserve to die alone just because Victoria Marshall couldn't see past her quarterly projections. I'm taking a week, I said quietly but firmly. I'll work remotely nights, weekends, whatever it takes. But I need to be there for him. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you defying me, Sarah? I'm doing what's right. She laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed through her corner office. What's right? Let me tell you what's right. What's right is doing your job. What's right is being a team player. What's right is understanding that in this business, we don't have the luxury of playing Mother Teresa. I stood there, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. I understand if you need to write me up or dock my pay, but I'm taking a week. Victoria walked around her desk slowly, like a predator circling its prey. Oh, I'll do better than that. She picked up my leave request form and tore it in half, then quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. You're fired. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let her see me flinch. You're firing me for requesting medical leave. I'm firing you for insubordination, poor performance, and failure to prioritize company interests. She smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. Enjoy unemployment, Sarah. I'm sure your patient will appreciate your sacrifice. I should have felt devastated. 3 years of my life, countless 60-hour weeks, all the missed family events and canceled vacations, all gone in an instant. But standing there in Victoria's office, watching her smug satisfaction, I felt something else entirely, relief. Thank you for making this decision easier, I said, turning to leave. Oh, and Sarah, Victoria called after me. Don't bother asking for a reference. As far as I'm concerned, you never worked here. I walked out of her office with my head held high, ignoring the curious stares of my soon-to-be ex-coworkers. My hands were steady as I packed up my desk, carefully placing my photos and personal items into a cardboard box. Jenny from accounting hurried over, her face full of concern. Sarah, what happened? I heard raised voices. Victoria fired me, I said simply, wrapping my favorite coffee mug in newspaper. What? She can't do that. Not over medical leave. I smiled at Jenny's outrage. She can, and she did. But it's okay, really. And surprisingly, it was. As I walked out of the glass and steel building that had been my professional home for the past 3 years, I felt lighter than I had in months. My career might be in shambles, but I knew I was doing the right thing. The hospital was a 20-minute drive from the office. As I navigated through mid-day traffic, I thought about how I'd ended up here. It had started. Thomas Edwards didn't look like a man worth millions. In his faded hospital gown, with his silver hair thinning and his face gaunt from chemotherapy, he looked like any other patient. But it was his eyes that caught my attention, bright, alert, and filled with a kindness that seemed to defy his circumstances. The Great Gatsby again, he'd said when I walked in with the book. Don't you think that's a bit on the nose for a cancer ward? I laughed, surprised by his humor. Would you prefer something more upbeat? I have the bell jar in my back. That had made him laugh too, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to brighten the sterile hospital room. We'd spent the next hour talking about literature, life, and everything in between. By the time I left, I knew I'd met someone special. Over the next few weeks, I found myself visiting Thomas more frequently. He told me about his life, how he'd built his investment firm from nothing, how he'd lost his wife to cancer 15 years ago, how his children were scattered across the globe, too busy with their own lives to visit their dying father. It's my own fault, he'd said without bitterness. I spent so many years building my empire, I forgot to build relationships. Now look at me, all the money in the world and not a soul to share it with. But that wasn't entirely true anymore. Because he had me. I pulled into the hospital parking lot, grabbing my box of belongings from the passenger seat. As I walked through the familiar corridors toward Thomas's room, I thought about Victoria's words, enjoy unemployment. She had no idea that some things were worth more than a steady paycheck or a corner office. Thomas was awake when I walked in, his face lighting up despite the obvious pain he was in. Sarah, what are you doing here so early? Don't you have work? I set my box down and pulled up my usual chair beside his bed. Change of plans. Looks like I'll be able to spend more time here after all. He studied my face carefully, his keen intelligence not dulled by illness or medication. What happened? I got fired, I said simply. My boss didn't appreciate me requesting medical leave to be here with you. Sarah, his voice was filled with concern. You shouldn't have done that. Not for me. I'm not worth. Don't, I interrupted gently. Don't say you're not worth it. Every human being deserves to have someone by their side during times like this. Besides, I added with a smile, that job was slowly killing my soul anyway. He chuckled weakly. Well, when you put it that way, his expression turned serious. But what will you do now? I shrugged, trying to appear more confident than I felt. I'll figure something out. Right now, let's focus on getting your pain levels under control. The nurse mentioned you refused your morning medication. Thomas looked sheepish. It makes me too groggy. I hate not being able to think clearly. And I hate seeing you in pain, I countered, reaching for the call button. Let's compromise. Take the medication, and I'll read to you until you fall asleep. I brought a new book. He raised an eyebrow. Please tell me it's not the bell jar. We both laughed, and for a moment, the weight of everything, my lost job, his illness, the uncertainty of the future, seemed to lift. The nurse came in with Thomas's medication, and I settled in to read, pulling out a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. As I read, watching Thomas slowly relax as the pain medication took effect, I thought about how sometimes the biggest sacrifices lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Victoria Marshall thought she was punishing me, but in reality, she'd given me something priceless, the freedom to be exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a story that would change both our lives forever. The next few days fell into a rhythm. I'd arrive at the hospital early in the morning, armed with books, crossword puzzles, and an endless supply of terrible jokes that somehow always made Thomas smile. We'd talk for hours about his business empire, my dreams of starting my own marketing consultancy, the books we loved, the lives we lived. Between monitoring his medication schedule and coordinating with his medical team, I learned more about Thomas Edwards the man, not just Thomas Edwards the patient. I learned about his first business venture, a failed computer repair shop in the 1980s that taught him more about resilience than any success ever could. I learned about his late wife, Margaret, and how her passion for art had influenced his early investment choices in emerging digital art platforms. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting long shadows across the room, Thomas asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Why did you really give up your job for me, Sarah?" I looked up from the newspaper crossword we'd been working on together. "I told you." "You told me what you thought I needed to hear," he interrupted gently. "But I want the truth." I set the newspaper aside, considering his question. "Do you remember your first week here, when I was reading to the patients?" He nodded. "I read to 17 people that day. 15 have family with them. 1 have friends visiting. You were the only one alone." I met his eyes. "When I asked the nurse about you, she said you'd been here for 3 weeks without a single visitor." It broke my heart. "Ah," he said softly, "pity then." "No," I said firmly, "not pity. Recognition. I recognize something in you that I've always seen in myself. The tendency to give everything to your work, to your goals, until one day you look up and realize you've forgotten to build connections along the way." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "You're too young to be so wise," he finally said. "And you're too important to be alone," I countered. He smiled, though his eyes were suddenly bright with unshed tears. "Important? I'm just a foolish old man, who built one of the largest investment firms in the country," I finished, "who revolutionized ethical investing practices, who created thousands of jobs and changed countless lives. Yeah, I did my research." "Google?" he asked, amused. "LinkedIn, actually. Your profile needs updating, by the way." We both laughed, and the heavy moment passed. But something had shifted between us. A deeper understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits despite our differences in age and circumstances. As the week progressed, Thomas's condition began to deteriorate more rapidly. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about making him comfortable and managing expectations. But Thomas himself remained clear-eyed and determined. "Sarah," he said one evening as the hospital settled into its nighttime routine, "I need you to do something for me." "Anything," I replied, and I meant it. "In my briefcase, the one my secretary brought last month, there's a letter. I need you to deliver it for me." I found the briefcase tucked away in his room's small closet, its leather worn but still elegant. Inside was a sealed envelope, addressed simply to Victoria Marshall, CEO, Marshall and Associates Marketing. My heart stopped. "Thomas." "Yes," he said, watching my reaction carefully. "Victoria Marshall, your former boss. Though she doesn't know it, her company's recent success is largely due to my firm's quiet investment and guidance." I stared at the envelope in my hands, my mind racing. "You knew? All this time, you knew where I worked?" He nodded. "I recognized your company ID card that first day. I've been following Marshall and Associates' progress for years. It's one of my more interesting investments. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to get to know you as Sarah, not as an employee of a company I partially own. He shifted in his bed, wincing slightly. And I'm glad I did. It showed me exactly who you are, someone who would give up everything to help a stranger, even when it costs you dearly. I sat down heavily in my chair, the envelope feeling suddenly heavy in my hands. What's in the letter? The truth, he said simply. About investment strategies, about company direction, about leadership. He paused, his expression hardening slightly. About how true success isn't measured in quarterly profits or market share, but in how we treat people. I looked at the envelope, then back at Thomas. When do you want me to deliver it? Tomorrow, he said. I think it's time Victoria Marshall learned a few things about the real costs of success. As I left the hospital that night, the letter safely tucked in my bag, I couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. Victoria Marshall had tried to break me, thinking she held all the power. But sometimes, life has a way of evening the score, not through revenge or malice, but through simple truth and justice. Little did Victoria know, her world was about to change forever, and I had a front row seat to watch it happen. The next morning, I stood in front of Marshall and Associates' gleaming office building, Thomas's letter clutched in my hand. The same security guard who had wished me good morning every day for 3 years now looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry, Ms. Collins, but you're not on the approved visitor list anymore. Ms. Marshall's orders. I smiled, pulling out my phone. Could you please call up to Victoria's office? Tell her I have a letter from Thomas Edwards. The guard's eyes widened slightly at the name. Clearly, he recognized it. After a brief call, he handed me a visitor's badge, his expression puzzled. Ms. Marshall will see you immediately. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt surreal. Just a week ago, I'd been rushing up here, juggling presentation materials and coffee, desperately trying to balance my work life with my volunteer commitments. Now I was calmer than I'd ever been, knowing that what happened next would change everything. Victoria's assistant jumped up when I stepped out of the elevator. Ms. Marshall is waiting for you, she said, hurrying to open the office door. I noticed she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Word of my firing had clearly spread. Victoria sat behind her desk, her posture rigid, her expression carefully neutral. Sarah, she said coolly, I assume this isn't a misguided attempt to get your job back. I placed Thomas's letter on her desk. No, Victoria, this is a delivery from Thomas Edwards. She stared at the envelope, her perfectly manicured hand hovering over it. Thomas Edwards, the investor. The same. I sat down without being invited, enjoying the flash of annoyance that crossed her face. He asked me to deliver this personally. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she picked up the envelope. How do you know Thomas Edwards? He's my patient, I said simply. The one you fired me for helping. The color drained from Victoria's face as the implications hit her. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the letter, her eyes scanning the contents rapidly. I watched as her expression shifted from disbelief to horror to something close to panic. This can't be right, she whispered, more to herself than to me. What's wrong, Victoria? Not the letter you were expecting. She looked up at me, her usual composure completely shattered. He's pulling his investment. All of it, effective immediately. She shuffled through the papers frantically. This would ruin us. The Peterson account, the new office expansion, everything. It's all backed by his firm. I know, I said quietly. You know. Her voice rose sharply. You knew about this and you didn't say anything. When exactly should I have mentioned it? While you were firing me, or while you were threatening to blacklist me from the industry? Victoria stood up abruptly, starting to pace behind her desk. We have to fix this. You have to help me fix this. Talk to him, explain that it was all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I interrupted, my voice hardening. You fired me for trying to help a dying man. You mocked my compassion and treated basic human decency like a character flaw. That wasn't a misunderstanding, Victoria. That was a choice. She stopped pacing, turning to face me. Please, she said, and I was shocked to hear real desperation in her voice. I'll give you your job back, a promotion, a raise, whatever you want. Just help me save this. I thought about Thomas, lying in his hospital bed, still thinking of others even as his own time grew short. I thought about all the employees at Marshall and Associates who lived in fear of Victoria's moods and arbitrary decisions. I thought about Jenny from accounting crying in the bathroom after another public humiliation, and Mark from creative who had missed his daughter's recital because Victoria demanded last-minute changes to a presentation. I don't want my job back, I said finally, but I will tell you what Thomas told me to say when you made this offer. She leaned forward eagerly. Yes. He says you have a choice. You can keep his investment, keep your position, keep everything, but only if you agree to some changes. What changes? I pulled out another envelope, this one containing the document Thomas had drafted late last night. Complete restructuring of the company's management style. Implementation of proper work-life balance policies, fair medical leave, regular employee satisfaction surveys with real consequences for poor leadership. Oh, and, I pause, enjoying the moment, I'll be overseeing the changes as the new director of employee relations. Victoria's jaw dropped. You're joking. Thomas Edwards doesn't joke about business, I said. You have until the end of the day to decide. Accept these terms or watch everything you've built crumble. She sank into her chair, all pretense of superiority gone. He's really dying, isn't he? Yes, I said softly. He is, and his last act in business will either be saving this company from its toxic culture or making an example of it. The choice is yours. Victoria stared at the documents for a long moment. Finally, she looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something like respect in her eyes. You planned this, didn't you? Getting close to him, telling him about the company. I shook my head. No, Victoria. I just showed kindness to someone who needed it. Everything else, I gestured to the letters on her desk. This was all Thomas. He's been watching this company for years, waiting to see if you'd grow into the kind of leader he could trust. Last week, you showed him exactly who you are. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Victoria picked up a pen, her hand only slightly shaking as she signed the documents. I assume you'll want your own office. Corner office, I corrected. With a view. And I start next week. When I left Victoria's office, the whole floor was eerily quiet. Word would spread soon enough about what had happened, but for now, I savored the peace. I had one more stop to make. Thomas was sleeping when I returned to the hospital, his breathing shallow but steady. I sat in my usual chair, taking his frail hand in mine. It's done, I said softly. She signed everything. His eyes fluttered open, and a small smile crossed his face. Never doubted she would. Victoria Marshall isn't stupid. Ruthless, maybe, but not stupid. Thank you, I said, squeezing his hand gently. For everything. He shook his head slightly. No, Sarah. Thank you. You showed me that even at the end, it's possible to make a difference, to leave things better than we found them. Over the next few days, I split my time between the hospital and the office, setting up the new policies that would transform Marshall and Associates. Victoria, to her credit, threw herself into the changes with the same intensity she'd once used to terrorize her employees. Maybe she was just protecting her investment, or maybe something had genuinely shifted in her understanding of leadership. Thomas held on long enough to see the first employee satisfaction survey results, smiling weakly as I read him the overwhelmingly positive responses. See, he whispered. Sometimes the best investments are in people. He passed away peacefully 3 days later, holding my hand as I read to him from The Great Gatsby, his final joke about inappropriate book choices for a hospital ward. At his memorial service, I was surprised by the number of people who attended. Not just business associates and employees, but people whose lives he had touched in quiet ways. Scholarship recipients, small business owners he'd mentored, charity workers he'd supported anonymously. Victoria was there too, standing quietly at the back, looking thoughtful. A month later, I sat in my new corner office, reviewing applications for our expanded employee assistance program. Jenny from accounting poked her head in, grinning. You'll never believe what just happened, she said. Victoria approved all the flexible working requests, all of them, and she smiled while doing it. I laughed, glancing at the photo of Thomas I kept on my desk. People can surprise you sometimes, I said, especially when someone shows them a better way. As I looked out over the city skyline, I thought about how life has a way of coming full circle. Victoria had fired me for showing compassion, thinking it was a weakness. Instead, that same compassion had led me to Thomas, who showed us all that true strength lies in how we treat others. The company culture at Marshall and Associates was transforming, slowly but surely. Victoria was learning to balance ambition with empathy, and employees were finally feeling valued and heard. It wasn't perfect, change never is, but it was progress. Every morning, as I walked into the building, I remembered Thomas's words. Sometimes the best investments are in people. He had invested in me when I was just a volunteer reader, seeing something worth nurturing. Now I was investing in others, creating the kind of workplace where kindness wasn't seen as weakness, and where success was measured not just in profits, but in the lives we touched. Victoria still had her moments of old habits creeping back, but now there was a system in place to check her worst impulses. More importantly, she was beginning to see the benefits of a happier, more loyal workforce. Productivity was up, turnover was down, and our reputation in the industry was soaring. 1 year to the day after Thomas's passing, I received a package from his lawyers. Inside was a letter, written in his familiar shaky handwriting during his final days. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, a year has passed since our paths crossed. I hope by now you've seen the fruits of our little experiment in corporate transformation. But more than that, I hope you've realized something about yourself. You see, when you walked into my hospital room that first day, I didn't just see someone with a kind heart. I saw a leader, someone who understood that true power comes not from authority, but from empathy, someone who could change not just one company, but potentially an entire industry's approach to human capital. That's why I've left you something else: voting shares in my investment firm. Use them wisely. Look for other companies like Marshall and Associates, businesses with potential held back by toxic leadership. Change them too. You once told me that you gave up your job because you recognized something in me. Well, I recognize something in you too, the future of ethical business leadership. Make me proud. With gratitude and faith, Thomas. I sat in my office for a long time after reading that letter, watching the sun set over the city. In my inbox were dozens of emails from other companies asking about our transformation, wanting to know our secret. On my desk were reports showing record profits alongside unprecedented employee satisfaction scores. Victoria knocked on my door, holding 2 cups of coffee, a peace offering that had become our weekly tradition. Good news, she said, handing me a cup. The Peterson account just renewed their contract. They said it's because of our new corporate culture initiatives. I smiled, thinking of that day a year ago when she fired me over this same account. Funny how things work out, isn't it? She nodded, looking thoughtful. You know, I never thanked you properly for what you and Thomas did. You could have destroyed this company, but instead you saved it. Saved me too, if I'm being honest. Thank Thomas, I said softly. He believed in the power of second chances. And third and fourth, Victoria added with a wry smile. I should know. As she left my office, I looked again at Thomas's letter. Make me proud, he'd written. But I knew he already was proud, not just of me, but of every person in this building who had embraced change, who had learned to balance profit with compassion, who had discovered that success and kindness weren't mutually exclusive. Tomorrow, I would start looking at other companies, seeking out those who needed the same transformation. But for now, I sat in my corner office, sipping coffee and watching the city lights come alive, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought me to Thomas's hospital room, and for the chain of events that proved sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining something better. The next morning, as I walked into the building, the security guard who had once apologetically turned me away now greeted me with a warm smile. Good morning, Miss Collins, making any lives better today. I thought about Thomas, about Victoria, about all the changes we'd made and all the changes still to come. Every day, I replied. That's what good investments are all about. And somewhere I knew Thomas was smiling.